I'm going to put a little different twist on things. Those of you who don't know me, I'm from the county, and we've had a lot of real good sessions here this morning. We're going to bring a little different twist on it. I'd say we're going to bring agriculture into today's proceedings. And one of the things we have to congratulate Matt and his chamber for was recently they did a agricultural policy statement, and I might add they did a very good job with it. And it seems to be getting a lot of traction within the province. So thanks to you, Matt, and your crew. And I think that's probably what drove our keynote speaker today. He's going to talk to you about agriculture. Those of you who may or may not know, agriculture in the county here, including Windsor, is probably the largest or second largest economic driver, depending how you rate it, in the whole county. So very important economic driver to not only the county, but to the city as well. So a couple things about, I call him Frank, really it's Dr. Ingratta, but I've known Frank for probably longer than you've known me, Frank. And I don't think I've ever told this story, but back when I was growing up, Frank would often come to the agricultural conventions that we had in Leamington, and Frank would speak. And as a young, growing greenhouse lad, I always used to sit in the back and listen to what Frank said. And I found it very intriguing because at that time, Frank was traveling around the world learning about agriculture, and he would bring back some of the best practices and tell us that who were young, but actually just starting out in the greenhouse industry. So this man may be not directly involved for all the greenhouse things that you hear coming out of the county, but certainly he planted some of the few first seeds to start that industry back in the day, and I think I was probably one of them. So I'm going to read you his bio verbatim here. Frank Ingratta was appointed as Deputy Minister of Agriculture in December of 1997. For more than 30 years, Frank provided material to agri-food industry in rural communities in diverse positions within the constantly evolving Ministry of Agriculture and Food. Frank started his career in the ministry's office as an extension horticulturist, and then 14 years at the Horticultural Research Station in Vineland as a research scientist, as well as a chief research scientist. This followed by senior management positions as director, plant industry branch, CEO, crop insurance commission, assistant deputy minister, agriculture rural division. Frank also holds undergraduate and graduate degrees from the University of Guelph and a PhD in fungal physiology from the University of Toronto. He and his family reside in Guelph. Retired in 2006, Frank and Joan currently have created an advisory company, Ingratta Innovations Inc., providing services to the agri-food and social service sectors. He goes on to say about 15 boards, vice chairs, committees, from grapes to food processing, to orchards, field production. So with all that, please welcome Frank Ingratta. Dr.
Coley, thank you very much. I didn't know that I was speaking to an impressionable youth those many years ago at those greenhouse sessions that were held here in the Essex area. It was a pleasure to be invited to this session, and it also afforded me an opportunity to come down and spend a bit of time in Leamington last night with with family members. Much of my heritage goes back to this area, so it was a pleasure getting back here, not only to meet with family, but to be able to enjoy some of the fruits of one of Essex's important agricultural businesses. There are 15 wineries in this area, so a chance with family to have a glass of wine last night. So a pleasure to be back here. What I hope to do today is put agriculture, the agri-food industry, into a bit of economic context and talk about some of the challenges and opportunities for that sector. Interestingly, this morning, every one of the four panels, the issues that were presented in those four panels impact on the agri-food sector. I hope to blend in some of those comments with mine today. Certainly, energy important. Labor, not only labor for its utility, but its talent, a critical issue in the agri-food sector. Government support, infrastructure support to agriculture, also critical. Okay, just a bit of context setting. Agriculture in Canada, crops fairly steady, but a growing value, farm gate value, $29.8 billion in Canada. Livestock, a little bit more variation, but $20.8 billion industry in Canada. Interesting point, I've included payments. Agriculture, from a government perspective, under the British North American Act, is a joint jurisdiction between the federal and provincial government. And one of the things that is a consistent part of what happens in the agricultural sector are payments from government to support the vagaries, primarily to support the vagaries of attempting to produce food and materials in an open biological system known as the great outdoors. Those vagaries quite often lead to challenges in production or challenges in health of animals, and the payments that are provided to agriculture continue to be significant, but on an annual basis, about $3 billion a year go to farmers and food producers in Canada to help deal with issues like crop insurance and protecting against natural disasters. So agriculture is different, where many sectors of the economy have been reduced in terms of their financial support. Food production, agriculture production has always received that oversight from government. If we look to Ontario, the number of farms continues to decline. That shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. But I want to make the point that if you have an image of farms and farming in Ontario and in Canada as being small businesses, mom and pop operations, they're not. The average net worth of a farm in Ontario is approaching $1.8 billion. And specifically in Essex County, there are almost 100 farms in Essex County that have annual net receipts that exceed $2 million. So they are significant businesses. We talked presenters this morning talked a bit about trade. And I want to put this slide on to emphasize the importance of agri-food trade to our industry. In 2012, there's been a steady increase in exports of agri-food products from Ontario, but it reached $10.82 billion in 2012. Some of you will know that the current Premier offered a challenge last October to double the rate of growth of exports of agricultural products from the province. In achieving that doubling of rate of growth, there is an expectation that by the year 2020, that we will create over 100,000 new jobs in Ontario as a result of the growth and development of the agri-food sector. Important to note that imports continue to be just as important. As we sit here today, and snacks that were available, you notice that many of those snacks were not produced here in Ontario. So we have a very active trade and exchange in the agri-food sector. But again, focus on the fact that we are talking about $10 billion a year of agri-food exports. One of the interesting challenges within agriculture is what I would refer to as two solitudes in terms of a philosophical approach to agricultural exports. In the plant area, if you will, things from corn to greenhouse tomatoes to potted plants, we see a very active pursuit of international trade. But the reverse of that also exists in the livestock sector, where we see more hesitation in terms of having an open market to trade. I'm not an economist, so I won't go into great detail about the impact of trade, although one of the speakers this morning mentioned the value of trade, the economic value of trade, and put out the slide talking about trade of power in the Scandinavian countries and the benefit that it had for economy. Trade generally supports and stimulates the economy, and for the agri-food sector, it is important. And as I pointed out, the Premier is dedicated to the concept of doubling those exports. A bit more about trade: $1.4 billion in trade each day from Canada. 716 million cross each day between Ontario and U.S. Over the course of a year, again focusing on agri-food, $4 billion in agri-food exports moved through the Windsor-Detroit crossing, and $6 billion in imports come in through the Windsor-Detroit crossing. Important to remember those as we talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in front of the sector. The AOFP, the Alliance of Ontario Food Processors, have recently completed a study, and they've begun to quantify some of the economics again around the agri-food industry, and fuel a bit of that conversation about whether agriculture is the #1 or #2 industry in this province. Food processing industry is worth $39 billion. Agricultural farm gate receipts, $11 billion. And they sort of slide in that, oh, by the way, auto manufacturing, little business on the side, is worth $43.6 billion. So beginning to fuel that the conversation around where the largest industries are. It's a bit of an interesting debate. It's kind of like the game between the Bruins and the Canadiens, and pounding on the chest of who's bigger and who's better. The results of last night's game would suggest that there were two excellent hockey teams on the ice, but whether you're one or two, they both were excellent players, and both are important economic sectors in this province. If we look at GDP from farming, about $4 billion of GDP in Ontario. Food and beverage processing, $11 billion. Again, looking at these numbers showing a slow upward trend, but no doubt a continuing upward trend. Food service industry, important, $8.1 billion. The numbers are here on jobs, and when you add them all up, many people talk about the agri-food sector representing over 700,000 jobs in the province of Ontario. Again, whether you're quantifying the sector as being 1 or 2, you can use these types of numbers. Again, perhaps not as relevant as to whether you're 1 or 2, but over 700,000 jobs in the sector. So to be sure, an important part of the economic engine of the province. If we do attempt at some fair comparison, overall the Ontario GDP is $574 $0.5 billion. And if we look at the goods producing industry, agriculture is a significant element of the goods producing industry with a overall GDP of $8.7 billion, larger than the mining industry. Even though we look hopefully at the Ring of Fire and those types of activities, agriculture still and will continue to be a significant portion of the GDP for the province of Ontario. And again, this is where the debate around who's number one and number two may be slightly irrelevant when you look at the size of these goods producing industries against the GDP for the service industry. And again, an important part of what happens here in Windsor-Essex. The goods producing industry important to the base economic development of the province, but in a sense pales a bit in comparison to the increasingly large service industry. I want to talk a bit about the diversity of agriculture in Ontario and in Canada. Ontario is the #1 producer of this long list of agricultural commodities. When many people think about agriculture and farming in Canada, they immediately go to the wheat fields and the canola fields of Saskatchewan. They think about the significant beef industry out of Alberta, the dairy industry out of Quebec, but Ontario is the largest producer of this long array of commodities, and in fact produces over 200 agricultural commodities in this province. I want to focus it a bit, if you will, on Essex, or bring it down to Essex. Slightly over 1,500 farms in Essex, and they represent about 3% of the total number of farms in the province. And so I put this slide on to help perhaps drive the importance of specific sectors in the agriculture and food area here in Essex. By far and away the largest area of greenhouse production. These are 2012 numbers. I think the current number for square meters of greenhouse production are slightly in excess of 7,000 square meters, so a continued significant growth in the greenhouse area, and certainly the largest concentration of greenhouse production in the province. Wheat is one of the important field crops. Apples, grapes, point that out, and I'll go back to the 15 wineries, and there are some important conversations to be had around grapes and wine production in the province, because again, a significant economic engine. And field tomatoes, again, a significant contribution or concentration of the Ontario production here in Essex County. Important point around labor: 262,000 weeks of agricultural labor. 11.8% of all the agricultural labor in the province. It points to the fact that many of these commodities are very labor intensive. We heard this morning about labor being a relatively small part in the production of automobiles. In agriculture, labor represents, in many cases, with these horticultural crops, 40% of the costs of production. So labor becomes an extremely important and significant issue, not only in Essex, but in horticultural crop production, which is the focus of many of the agricultural commodities in Essex. Again, hopefully, this is, by the way, the last slide with numbers. The fact that Essex does, I guess I should put on the last slide with numbers. Focusing on the farm cash receipts to give you a sense of the magnitude of the industry. Almost $500 million on an annual basis in greenhouse vegetable production, soybeans, floriculture, mushrooms. Mushrooms are of particular interest. When Coley talked about my travels around the world as a research scientist, it was in greenhouse vegetables and mushrooms. So I continue to have ongoing interest in the mushroom industry, but a significant economic engine in Essex. almost $35 million worth of mushroom production in Essex alone. All that to say that agriculture is big business in Canada and in Ontario and in Essex. I know the area is known for its connection to the automotive industry, but it also needs to be known and recognized for its significant contributions in the agri-food sector. So let me turn a bit to some of the challenges. And there are a number of challenges for the agri-food industry. Land base is an issue. Within a concentrated setting such as Essex County, Windsor, there are always rural-urban conflicts with agricultural production, whether it's issues around noise or light drift or odors. It is an issue of land use challenge. Natural resources will always be an area of some concern in agricultural production. We are critically based on the use of water and climate in production. It's one of our great challenges. This last winter I think demonstrated very well one of the climatic issues that we deal with, that farmers and agriculturalists need to deal with. Managing to grow crops in our environment is a challenge, has a significant cost associated with it, and managing those natural resources will always be a challenge in the northern temperate climate that we live in. Labor, I already talked a bit about the importance of labor in agricultural production, and particularly horticultural production, and particularly in Essex. Tanya talked about 500 job postings currently available through her office for jobs in agriculture. The cost and availability of labor for agriculture, particularly intensive horticultural production, is a significant issue, one that we need to manage through carefully. Competitiveness, I talked a bit about the significance of trade in the agri-food area. We are not the low-cost jurisdiction of production of many commodities. So we need to look at ways to continue to be competitive, even though we're not the low-cost jurisdiction. And I'll talk a bit more about that in the opportunities section. The last challenge that I throw out, there's a longer list, but this is not intended to be a 2 or 3 hour lecture. Escalating input costs are a challenge to the agri-food sector. Energy costs, we heard about that this morning. Regulation, it's my view as things. Regulation can be an escalation to cost, so it's important to look at the set of regulations that an industry is confronted with and ensure that the opportunities to minimize the impact on business always needs to be considered as regulations are developed. So opportunities for the agri-food sector. We are blessed with what I would call a consistent, all of you ate today, and hopefully they don't take the buffet away. I haven't eaten yet today, but we have a consistent demand for the product. As the world continues to expand, and as we continue to look at export markets, as third world countries begin to look at desire to increase their protein levels, to increase the diversity of their diets, there is that continuing growing demand for agri-food products. We need to always focus on that as an opportunity. Agriculture is an industry that will continue to be there no matter what the ups and downs of the economy are, because there is that consistent and growing demand. Essex and Ontario is somewhat blessed by being in the center of what I call a very significant regional market, one that can be achieved, can be accessed on a daily basis. It is a real opportunity for Essex and for Ontario. And this point obviously gets to the conversation about infrastructure and those three major projects that are being considered and developed here in the Windsor area. Access to those markets will be very much dependent on the infrastructure to get those markets across the border. Technology adaptation, in my view, and pardon my bias and my technical background and interest in research, technology adaptation is the real opportunity for agriculture. It's, as I keep saying, it's not an old, mature industry. It's one that I believe has demonstrated its ability to take new technology, new adaptations, and be able to increase productivity, increase the quality of quality and diversity of food products. And I think that continued technology adaptation will continue to drive and support the industry. Some interesting conversations this morning with Coley around lighting technology and how we're able to manage plants using different forms of lighting technology and compensate for some of those northern climate challenges that we have. It's the use of that technology that I think will continue to position Ontario and Essex as a position or as a place where we can continue to be competitive in the agri-food sector. Government support, I think, is an opportunity for agriculture. Go back to my first slide where I showed that the federal and provincial governments, on about a 60-40% cost sharing basis, do provide financial support to the ag sector. They also have developed a number of strategies around growth, the Premier's commitment around increasing the rate of exports, moving primarily into the U.S. market. That type of support looks at the potential for 120,000 jobs, as I said, by the year 2020. So it's not a sector that the government has, if you will, shied away from developing partnerships and supporting a number of initiatives. Finally, the opportunity that I've listed is what I call market development. And there have been some elements of government support. I find it interesting that, for the most part, government advertisements are cut off during a political campaign during the writ period. But I note that the Foodland Ontario advertising program is specifically excluded from that moratorium. We need to continue to develop those markets. That population in that 500-kilometer radius that I talked about aren't just naturally going to say, oh yeah, let's go to Ontario and get their products. We need to continue to drive the value and quality of our products to achieve that export growth. I want to make two last points around government support. The Ontario Federation of Agriculture has suggested that what I call the gasification of rural Ontario, much like electrification happened in the early part of the 1900s, there still is an opportunity for gasification and providing gas, natural gas outlets throughout rural Ontario. For those of you who don't live out there, you may not realize the significant cost of providing heating fuels throughout rural Ontario. And it's been estimated that if natural gas was made available to all farms in Ontario, that there could be an $815 million a year savings to agricultural producers. So that's the type of large infrastructure initiative that governments can consider as they support agriculture. And my last example of government support, and it deals with the greenhouse industry, and it, if you will, it goes back to some of Coley's conversations about many years ago. I would have you think back to mid-1970s, and I know a number of you weren't here at that point, but in the mid-1970s, when we had one of our first significant energy crises, the government of Ontario made a decision to put in place a support program that provided $17,000 to greenhouse operations if they installed energy conservation devices. And again, we had the conversation earlier today about the value, the economic value of energy conservation. But they got a grant of up to $17,000 to install energy conservation devices in the greenhouse. I make that point because at that specific time, in the Cleveland area, there were 700 acres of greenhouses, and the Ohio and U.S. government did nothing to support their industry through that energy crisis. Today, there are essentially 0 acres of greenhouses in the Cleveland area, and you've already seen the number and size and the economic importance of greenhouses here in Essex County. An example of an opportunity of where government policy, government programs can make some good business decisions that support an industry and drive them, continue to drive them as an economic engine. So my final slide talks about what I think what must happen in the province. We must have consistent cross-border systems, both infrastructure, both regulation. I know there are some issues with plant materials, agricultural products moving across the border around the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and some need and an offer that this chamber has made to spearhead some of the discussions to ensure that those regulations don't impede the appropriate flow of materials across the border. And specifically areas of harmonization. There are some real challenges with food and agricultural trade around the issues of harmonizing with our major partner. Work in that area certainly needs to continue. I think there are opportunities for enhanced marketing promotion. The Ontario Greenhouse Vegetable Growers Association have recently been awarded $350,000 from the federal provincial government to expand their marketing initiatives throughout the north central U.S. Some real opportunities, some opportunities for significant payback with that type of investment. Stabilization of the workforce. I can't state too strongly the importance of labor in the agri-food system. There are some efforts at mechanization. Certainly we've come a long way from a lot of the stoop labor that existed 30 and 40 years ago, but there is still an absolute demand for a stable workforce. I know there are some recommendations around regional transportation to help get the workers into those rural situations to provide that labor force. I think it's a critical thing for assisting in getting Ontario workers into the agricultural system. At the same time, the foreign worker program that has been so much maligned in the last months and last years for inappropriate use by some employers, it has become an absolutely critical program for agricultural production. There are industries, and again I think of the mushroom industry, that well over 40% of their workforce comes from the temporary foreign worker program. So it's become a significant element of them being able to do business. And I don't want to talk about labor without the issue of skills development. Again, touched on this morning. Technology continues, and the use of technology continues to grow within the ag sector, and those are skilled positions, and we need to ensure that the mechanisms are in place to train and develop those young people to enter and support the industry. Technology adaptation, I think technology is what will continue to have the Ontario-Essex agri-food industry continue to be competitive. Without those technological adaptations, many of the lower cost production areas in the world will enter in and take control of our markets, and so I think technology adaptation is absolutely essential. So hopefully I've been able to give you some sense of the importance, the magnitude of the agri-food industry, some of the specific relevant points to Essex agriculture and food industry and how it fits into the overall economy. Thank you for the opportunity to be here with you today and share those thoughts.
Frank, thank you very much. Frank, thank you very much for that outstanding presentation. And of course, we have some gifts for our speakers and moderators right here, some vegetables for you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
So, I want to thank once again the presenting sponsor, the University of Windsor, Dr. Michael Sue, and his team. Couldn't have done it without you. I want to thank all of our sponsors, moderators, participants. I'm sure we're all swimming in numbers right now. So thanks again, everybody, for coming. And we look forward to putting this up on our web in the next couple of days. And have any questions, feel free to give the Chamber of Commerce a call. And special thank you to Alan Odette for coming down from Toronto. Thanks.